Dybbuk Box. The story of the Dybbuk Box begins with an antique wooden wine cabinet bought at an estate sale in Oregon in the early 2000s. Its new owner, antiques dealer Kevin Mannis, later described an unsettling chain of events that began as soon as the cabinet entered his life. According to his account, lights in his shop and home flickered and failed without explanation. Objects broke or went missing. A heavy smell of jasmine and, at other times, cat urine seemed to appear and vanish at random, even when no animals were present. Mannis said that he began to experience vivid, recurring nightmares of an old woman with sunken eyes and a twisted face standing over him in bed. When he loaned or sold the cabinet to friends and relatives, they later reported the same dream, the same woman, the same suffocating presence. Around the same time, he linked a series of health crises in his family to the box, including a relative's stroke shortly after it was given as a gift. Frightened by the pattern, he decided to get rid of the cabinet and listed it on eBay with a detailed warning, calling it a Dybbuk Box, and claiming it contained a malicious spirit drawn from Jewish folklore. The listing attracted intense attention. Subsequent owners repeated and expanded the story, describing strange shadows, unexplained welts, bleeding gums, choking sensations, and waves of sudden illness. One later owner, museum curator Jason Haxton, said he suffered skin problems, coughing blood, and episodes of internal pain after bringing the box into his home and workplace. He eventually sealed it and stored it in a hidden location, convinced that it was dangerous even to approach. The cabinet was eventually acquired by paranormal collector Zach Bagans and placed on display in his haunted museum in Las Vegas. There, it became linked with a new layer of alleged curse activity. During a televised visit, musician Post Malone was filmed touching Bagans' arm as Bagans handled the box. In the weeks that followed, Malone's plane suffered a tire blowout that forced an emergency landing. His car was involved in a crash, and his former home was targeted in an armed break-in. These unrelated events were widely retold as the curse of the Dybbuk Box, extending to anyone who came near it. In 2021, however, Mannis publicly stated that the entire backstory he wrote for the eBay auction was a piece of creative fiction designed as an interactive horror story. Skeptical investigators who studied the cabinet's construction concluded it was a 20th century minibar, not an old ritual object. Despite this, the box continues to be displayed as a cursed relic, and visitors still approach it as if it carried a real, active curse. Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is a child-sized figure dressed in a sailor suit, stuffed with wood wool and seated today behind glass in the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. The doll originally belonged to a boy named Robert Eugene Jean Otto, whose prominent family lived in a large house on Eaton Street in the early 1900s. As a child, Jean was rarely seen without the doll, which he simply called Robert. Soon, unusual incidents in the house began to be blamed on the toy. Family members and servants later reported hearing small footsteps running through empty rooms and childish giggles when Jean was known to be asleep. Toys appeared mutilated, furniture was found overturned, and objects were moved or broken with no one admitting responsibility. When Jean was confronted as a boy, his reported answer was always the same: Robert did it. Over time, the sense grew in the household that the doll was not simply an inanimate companion. Visitors recalled seeing its expression appear to shift, or claimed its head had turned slightly between one glance and the next. After Jean's death, the doll remained in the house. Later, occupants reported hearing footsteps in the attic where it was stored, and voices that seemed to come from behind the door. Some claimed to hear the doll's giggle, just as earlier generations had described. Eventually, the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum, where its reputation as a cursed object intensified. There, it is displayed in a case surrounded by photographs and letters. The museum posts a clear rule: Visitors should treat Robert with respect and ask permission before taking a photograph. Those who ignore the rule sometimes write back. The walls near the exhibit and the museum's archives hold hundreds of apology letters sent from all over the world. Writers describe car accidents, broken bones, job losses, relationship breakdowns, and sudden illness that they link to their visit. Many say that their cameras failed, or their pictures were mysteriously corrupted only when aimed at the doll. Afterward, they request forgiveness and ask Robert to lift the curse they believe they triggered by mocking him or taking a photograph without permission. The museum treats these letters as part of the legend. Regardless of origin, they show how strongly visitors feel that this small sailor-suited doll holds the power to harm. Annabelle. The real Annabelle is not the cracked porcelain figure seen in films, but a soft, familiar Raggedy Ann doll. According to the account made famous by paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, the story began in 1970 when a nursing student named Donna received the doll as a birthday gift from her mother. Donna and her roommate Angie placed it in their apartment, treating it as a simple decoration. Before long, they noticed that Annabelle seemed to change position when no one was home. Arms and legs shifted. The doll was found in different rooms, or seated upright when they were sure they had left it lying down. Soon, small notes appeared on parchment-like paper that the roommates said they did not own. The messages, written in what they described as a childlike hand, read, "Help us," or "Help me." The doll itself showed what they took as physical marks of contact, specks of red on its cloth hands and chest that resembled blood. Disturbed, Donna and Angie consulted a medium. During a séance, the entity speaking through the medium claimed to be the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, who said she had died on the property years before and wanted to stay with them. The women agreed to let the presence remain, believing they were comforting a lost child. The Warrens later said this was a dangerous mistake. After further incidents, including their friend Lou being attacked in a vivid nightmare and waking with what he described as claw-like scratches on his torso, the case was referred to the couple. They concluded that no child's spirit was involved. In their view, an inhuman, demonic entity was manipulating the doll in order to gain trust, with the ultimate aim of full possession of a human host. Annabelle, they said, was merely the focusing object. The doll was removed to the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, where it was placed in a locked wooden and glass case bearing a warning not to open it. Over the years, stories accumulated around that case. A priest who reportedly mocked the doll during a visit was said to have suffered a serious car accident shortly afterward. Another story claimed that a young man who banged on the case and challenged the doll to do its worst later died in a motorcycle crash. More recently, paranormal investigator Dan Rivera died unexpectedly in 2025 while on tour with the doll as part of a traveling exhibit. Authorities recorded his death as natural and cardiac-related, but in popular retellings, it is often added to the list of events attributed to the Annabelle curse. Skeptical writers note that all details about the doll's alleged attacks come through the Warrens and their associates, with no independent record of demonic activity. Nonetheless, the Annabelle case remains one of the most cited examples of cursed object in modern folklore, treated by many as a very real, ongoing threat. Busby's chair. In North Yorkshire, England, a simple oak chair is suspended from the ceiling of Thirsk Museum so that no one can sit in it. This is Busby's stoop chair, also known as the dead man's chair, and it is said to carry a curse dating back more than 3 centuries. The legend begins with Thomas Busby, a local criminal and innkeeper involved in counterfeiting with his father-in-law, Daniel Audie. In 1702, after a violent dispute, Busby murdered Audie, was arrested, and condemned to death by hanging. According to later stories, Busby had a particular attachment to a low-backed wooden chair in his inn. One version says that Audie provoked him by sitting in that chair and refusing to move. Another claims that Busby, drunk and furious, was sitting in it when he was dragged away to be executed. Before his death, either in the inn or on the way to the gallows, he was said to have pronounced a curse that anyone who sat in his chair would soon die. After his execution, his body was displayed in chains at a nearby crossroads, a point that came to be known as Busby Stoop. Over time, the chair's reputation grew. During the Second World War, Canadian airmen stationed at a nearby base drank at the pub that stood by the old stoop. Local tradition holds that those who dared each other to sit in Busby's chair often failed to return from bombing missions. In the decades that followed, a series of fatal accidents became attached to the chair's legend. A chimney sweep who sat in it and later fell to his death. A pair of Royal Air Force men killed in a car crash after leaving the inn. A builder who sat in the chair at lunch and died later that day in a construction accident. By the 1970s, locals believed dozens of deaths were linked in some way to the seat. In 1978, the pub's landlord, tired of the stories and aware of the chair's effect on visitors, donated it to Thirsk Museum on the condition that no one ever sit in it again. The museum agreed and hung the chair high on a wall to make this physically impossible. A later examination by a furniture historian suggested that the piece was made using 19th century machine methods, dating it to around 1840, more than a century after Busby's execution. That finding cast doubt on any direct link between the murderer and the existing chair, yet the legend persists. The object on the wall remains the focus of a curse narrative in which a simple act, sitting down, is believed to seal a person's fate.